next item on the agenda is the discussion on the state auditor's comments and response. A preliminary report on the sheriff's audit 2013. Don Sturgeon will tell you that one of my favorite subjects in high school was history, and that was one of the few places where I excelled was history. So at this time I'm going to give you a brief history about the sheriff's office and some of the past sheriffs. This will span over a 50-year period. Back in the 60s, there was a gentleman named Ed Whalen who was sheriff of Franklin County. He was a World War II veteran and served on the State Highway Patrol before it became state police. Very successful businessman. I think there's some people in this room that will remember Ed Whalen, who served in the 60s. Following Ed Whalen was a local person that most people who will remember is Leon Herod, another very, very successful business with Herod Brothers Funeral Home, and it's in the third generation under the ownership of our current coroner, Will Herod, and his father works there with him, Mike Herod, who owned it after his father passed. After that, there was the 70s come along, and there was a gentleman who served a long time as a deputy sheriff. His name was Jack Penn, and he was elected sheriff in 1970 and served through 73. During Jack Penn's tenure in the sheriff's office, there was a jailbreak. In 1949, the jail addition was added on to the old courthouse, and during the time in the 60s and 70s, there was a jailbreak, and Jack Penn was near the office at the time and went out in the alley and was stabbed. He recovered nicely and became sheriff later on. After that, Bob Lewis was elected sheriff in 1974 and served a term through 1977. Bob was quite the bookkeeper. He spent a lot of time developing new programs in bookkeeping for the sheriff's office, especially in the tax area. And I served a short period of time at the end of Jack Penn's tenure as a deputy, and I served with Bob Lewis as a deputy. 1978, I was elected and served through 81. At that time, you couldn't succeed yourself, and a law passed later on where you could have additional terms. After I left, Sam Herod, a local businessman, a longtime elected official in Franklin County, served as Franklin County Sheriff through 1982 through 1985. I was re-elected for my second term in 1986, where I served 2006. And after that, retired city policeman and dare instructor Steve Clark was elected and served from 2007 and through 2010, and then our current sheriff, Pat Milton, was elected. The reason I tell you all this is all these 7 sheriffs took the job very serious and tried to stay within budget, and they did without a lot of things to stay within budget, and there was a lot of times that all these sheriffs, who I knew very well, and I discussed this with them, and when I got elected, I talked with Ed Whalen, Leon Herod, Jack Penn, Bob Lewis, and one of the things they said to me is, you know, you got some primary duties, collecting the taxes, service to the court, serving civil process, and of course law enforcement. But the main thing you've got to do is stay within budget and try to have some excess fees. Try to pay all your bills, pay your salaries, and have excess fees for the court. So that's what this group of sheriffs did in the last 50-year period. So we're in new charted waters with this least recent audit report, and this time I asked the county attorney, who I've met with, if he could bring us up to date with information that he's discovered on the shortfall in the sheriff's office.
When I went back in, I pulled out with bunch of AG's opinions, bunch of statutes, with the assistance of a lot of the other people, some audit reports, etc. And from what I understand, and I'll defer to the treasurer on it, the auditor has identified 2 areas of concern in the fiscal year ending or calendar year ending 2013. I've also spoke with the sheriff about it, exchanged emails with Department of Local Government, etc. And they have instructed us to find a remedy for what they've identified as $36,552 of hard cash deficits in the 2013 calendar year. What that means is that there was insufficient funds to pay liabilities in the amount of $36,552. Without getting into the political remedies involved, I've been able to identify 4 options. My expertise does not extend into the exact amount of how it arose, the internal controls, lack thereof, or otherwise, but I tried to analyze it from 2 steps. Number 1, figure out how to cure it, and number 2, figure out how it never happens again. As to task 1, I think this court has 4 options that's before you. First of all, let me say this. One of the concerns that was raised to me, and I think it was because of maybe history, practice, and training or whatever, was whether or not fee offices have officials in fee offices are personally liable for running over debts, etc. The only authority that I could find where a fee officer was personally liable, that is out of their own pocket, for deficiencies or excesses, are in those situations where the expenses in question are disallowed. For example, it was identified expenses such as overdrafts when you bounce a check. Those are disallowable expenses. Having to run a budget off of a loan in one county, the auditors criticized that the interest was not appropriate because that should have been funded by fiscal court. So there was a sheriff who had to go out and take a loan because of the way it's funded at the beginning of the year. They said, too bad, so sad, you got to pay the interest back. The expenses, from what I understand from the auditor in this case, were in fact allowable expenses. That is, if they were budgeted, they would have been ordinary necessary expenses for the sheriff's office. So I want to get that out of the way right now. I can find no legal authority that would obligate the sheriff to pay these funds out of his own pocket for running out. I found a lot of authority that pointed out that you as the court are responsible, along with the sheriff, for monitoring and maintaining the fiscal affairs of the county. And that can be done literally in 120 different ways. For example, in some counties, and I think you've received a case from Mr. Salzman up at local government that allows for the county to take over the operations of the fee offices, much like a department. I found authority to modify this year's budget to pay back, that is, to reduce 2014 budget dollar for dollar for the expenses accrued in 2013, for which a hard deficit was ran. This is not a situation where you can just let it ride and say, too bad, so sad, and let it go. You all made a trade-off with the fee officers. Constitutionally, it's a trade-off, not anything you've actually done, but the trade-off goes like this. Fee officers, you give us money, and we'll allow you to use some of that money for your budget. You all politically decided that there was no money but for $10 that was going to come back. When you made that trade-off, you lost the luxury of some padding that would have otherwise been available to modify 2013's budget. By having no excess fees or revenue line items, you're stuck, and I expressed that to the sheriff. You're stuck with taking it out dollar for dollar from 2014 budget because he overran 2013. So again, you got 4 options. First is modify 2014 budget, dollar for dollar, to make up the deficiency. Second option is let it go and just increase 2014's budget to make up 2013's budget by adding additional money in 2014. That's a viable option, as evidenced by the fact that in 2013 the sheriff received excess revenues above what was budgeted. So I would anticipate there would be excess fees from what was budgeted this year, but I don't know. We won't know till the end of the year. The third option isn't available, which is to seek direct reimbursement from the person of the sheriff for the excess or the deficiency, because the expenses in question are not disallowed expenses. That is, they're ordinary necessary expenses relating to the operation of the sheriff's office. And the fourth option is to go with a, they call it fee sharing, but the case you all saw expressly authorizes by ordinance for fiscal court to assume all of those fees, and then the sheriff's office comes back and seeks permission on spending much less. So y'all get to decide. The rest of it's a political question. How are you going to handle it? It has to be cured, at least $36,552.
What do you recommend?
I don't have a recommendation on that. You all made his budget, came back and he asked, he exceeded it. He's got a problem, you've got a problem, you're going to have to fix it. The only viable option you've really got at this point is to cure it either by adding more money to this year's budget and pay back 13, or reduce this year's budget dollar for dollar for the 13 deficiency. Then we're going to have to cross the bridge on what you're going to do next year. That is for the 2015 calendar year budget. I'm trying to focus on how to solve this problem first. At the very least, it's going to be a budget amendment. The question is, you're going to add more money to it and pay it back, or are you just going to take it dollar for dollar out of this year's budget in September?
Is this the first time he's went over budget that you're aware of?
Well, he's came back a number of times, asked the annual order be increased. That, again, is something that hadn't happened in the last 50 years. I know that during my tenure, which is half the 50 years I spoke of, 25 years, that at least $2 million or more have been turned over to this court to help operate county government from sheriff's fees. I can't speak for the sheriffs prior to me. I'm sure there was excess fees for them as well, but it's something over $2 million during my tenure. And that was at a time when the county was really struggling. We had the Hunter Hay case. I know that some of those fees helped defray that. I know that one particular year we had 2 years overlap in taxes during my tenure, and I had a large amount of excess fees, and there was a fire truck purchased with sheriff's excess fees. So the sheriff's office has supported county government general fund for a number of years up to recently.
Can we have Pat speak?
Well, I was going to ask the treasurer to give her comments, then the sheriff after that. So, Susan.
Well, the only comment I would make is that we can get a report from the sheriff's office for the year-to-date activity. I know they're required to, as we are, required to report to the state monitoring agent for local government on a quarterly basis. We're mid-September. We're close to the end of the third quarter, which makes his year almost over. Mm-hmm. We have all the taxing districts with their rates set. He can make a new projection for commissions that would be very accurate. It should be more accurate than it was, in December of last year for the commissions. So be reviewing revenues to see where they compare with the budget, as well as expenditures. As the judge pointed out, in the 2013 budget, or actual money handling took in about $140,000 more than budgeted. So we may be looking at a situation where there's anticipated revenue that might cover the 2013 shortfall with the budget amendment, as the county attorney pointed out. So a review at least through August, and I would say even go to look at the quarterly report through September and do the analysis on the revenue with the information that we have, and see where we stand together, and then move forward from there with a committee or another meeting.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Sheriff Milton.
Thank you, Judge. First of all, I take responsibility for it. We had some extraordinary things that happened. We opened up a 102,000 square foot judicial center that we had to staff. And in lieu of trying to save, we went with part-time people instead of full-time. And you got to equip them. You got to equip deputies to do the job. You also have to train them. And we were not anticipating the judicial center to open till 14. So that was an unbudgeted issue as part of that. The second thing that we had happen was we underestimated our vehicle maintenance. We got to keep cars on the road to keep the service and to respond to the calls. These are the two issues that caused the overspending, or going over the estimated budget, was because of the new judicial center and hiring and equipping the deputies to do that. If you recall, that was brought to your attention at the September meeting back in the end of 13 about that was an issue, and it never went any further than that. Also the cars, the cars, we had asked for the money up front to buy the cars to save the money on maintenance. Or we have a very aging fleet, and it takes money to keep those cars on the road, and answer the calls for service, and to serve the papers, and to do things that we need to do. That's it. Those two items, those two issues are what caused it. I would invite you out to see if you see any frills at the sheriff's office. There are none. We're getting the job done, we're working hard. Two things that I regret, but there's nothing that we either couldn't open the judicial center or have the staff to staff it, and had to keep cars on the road. I mean, that's it. These are things that was brought to the attention.
Well, I remember you asking for money, and I think we cut it in half or didn't do anything.
No, didn't do anything on it.
I remember.
But that was for the uniforms. You talking about the uniforms?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said, well,
The outfit.
go ahead. You said, go ahead. What was said around the table was go ahead and get them.
Yes.
We'll figure out how to we'll
Pay
deal
for
with
it
that
later.
later or
There we
something
are.
like that.
Exactly what was said.
Well, that's crazy. But I will say to you that I never, in the last 4 years, and of course everybody's been most anxious to get this courthouse open, because of being out on the west side of town. I never ever heard anybody say it was going to be in 2014 that it was going to open. It was always going to be 2013, and it was always going to be. In fact, most anticipation was it would have been earlier.
Yeah.
Like September.
Yeah.
That was really the date that they were pushing for. So I don't buy that. But I do understand that we did not address the issue about the uniforms. And here it is. So we're addressing it now. About the cars, I don't know what to say about the cars. I mean, I've always preached that we need to have a schedule for replacement of cars because it becomes a point of diminishing returns. But I don't know enough about the cars that you have and
I'm going to get
how
you
many.
the list of the vehicles, their age, their year. We've got a 14, 15-year-old vehicle. We've got over, I think, 10 to 12 of them, and I'm speaking from memory
Yeah.
after everything else, that have in excess of well over 100,000 miles on them
Yeah,
that are being driven every day.
yeah. But I guess where I'm concerned about is the fact that it wasn't until this audit appeared, did you even know that you were over budget?
Yeah.
I mean, you did.
We were aware of that. Once you close your books in January or at the end of December,
Yeah.
by the time the rest of your stuff comes out, it's the end of January or so. So yeah, we were anticipating this to be an issue and to happen based on these two extraordinary events that happened.
It's what, September now? I'm
It's
just now
September.
Well, the
finding out.
auditors, but the auditors are there. I mean, everything we have gets audited, and they've
Right.
been there for a while. Also, the state tax revenue audit is going on right now.
I guess I don't remember
So-
any conversations about y'all, the auditors coming tomorrow, and I'm gonna tell you, we're screwed here. I mean, they're gonna give us a bad report, and we're over $30-some thousand. I mean, I don't remember that conversation.
I don't
Let me
either.
remind the court the significance of that $30,000.
Yes,
There were receipts received that were $130,000 over what was budgeted and were also spent. The $30,000 represents a deficit above
Right.
that.
I got
So in
you.
fact, the deficit is $172,000 above what this court approved for spending. Part of that was attributed to the fact that they don't close the books at the end of the calendar year. So you're able to apply this year's payments to last year's. Payroll was paid in from the school resource officers from the county schools, which were commingled with other operating expenses at the sheriff's office. That's one of the things that I'm trying to address to ensure that this never occurs again by closing the books annually, and to ensure that flow-through money such as be it drug money, be it forfeiture money, whatever, are strictly complied with for the purpose for which they were done. The county floated payroll to the tune of $17,000. The school reimbursed the county for that. It hit the sheriff, and the sheriff put it in there, holding on to it, and didn't forward it on,
Counselor, we deposit those checks, we deposit those reimbursements
which is a problem.
in our
It's commingled.
account, in our revenue account, that
Right.
all the tax fees and everything else.
They should have never been placed in revenue account at
And
all.
we have taken the appropriate steps.
Correct, and I recognize that it's all kind of new and stuff with the SRO.
Sure.
The SRO's been a thorn in the sheriff's side and my side.
there's been a lot of
just to
issues
get
We
it along.
inherited several problems and we've had
To be
to
sure.
fix them all. Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
but there are internal control problems that still need to be addressed. What I
Well,
asked
do
the
you,
court to
do you
today-
need help out there with your internal
We're
controls?
fine. We are fine.
I mean, that's
We
that's
had
what I'm,
we had two issues, the judicial center and the fleet. We underestimated. You all had said, cut, 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 cut. We thought that we could get by on $20,000 for vehicle maintenance. We couldn't. The fleet's in that bad a shape or that aging like that, and it costs money. If you have a transmission or an engine, brakes, tires, and all the things that it takes. And over the last 50 years, we've not had a law enforcement sheriff. We've had tax collectors.
That's not true.
You have a
Well,
law enforcement
without getting
sheriff
into that
now.
issue, what I
well,
asked the
you
court
don't
working.
don't go down that road.
What I'd ask the
Okay.
court to try to identify at this point is how to solve this problem.
Right.
I've talked to the sheriff, I know he's working diligently to try to identify ways for internal controls to where it does not occur in the future. But you can talk about remodeling it all you want to. It's burning right now. You gotta
Sure.
put the fire out first, then we can come back and
Sure.
revisit blame game, whatever you wanna call it. This problem has to be solved now.
The
Then
year
we can figure
before,
out how to cure it later
the year
on.
before the audit was flawless.
Correct.
No recommendations or nothing. This occurred because we opened up and had to equip deputies
Yeah.
and because of the fleet. Those are the two issues that caused the problem. That's it.
But the fleet is always there. The courthouse
The
is
fleet's
done.
been worse, and it's been aging, and it's getting worse every year. That's why the consistency that you said of putting the cars on a rotation. We've already taken the necessary steps. We've met with the auditor to take the necessary steps and their recommendations on how to do a couple things differently. We're going to do that. We're looking at that hard. We're also taking other steps to save money, like the vehicles that we seize, and utilizing those for the detectives to drive. Instead of using public money, we're using drug dealers to their cars to drive. So, I mean, we put things in motion and are putting things in motion to do that every day. This was an extraordinary circumstance with a couple of issues that happened. And that's what happened. That's it. We've done fine for 3 years. We have one issue. And this year's budget is we're on track. We're fine. And actually, before you ask, you all asked about the court security hours, and what did I tell you? I told you January and February and March are probably going to be a little high. We went from 1,902 hours in January. We've averaged 1,406.35 in August and 1,406.09 in July, 1,402.25 in June. May was 1,568.30, and that was because of a murder trial. 1,465 in April. So everything you've asked me to do, we've done. I told you what was going to happen, and it has. So, I mean, we're doing everything that's been asked. We had two extraordinary issues that happened. I'm upset about it. I know he's upset about it. There ain't nobody more upset than me about it. But those were decisions that we had to make in order to do the job and get the job done.
I hear you.
Rick, when is this problem supposed to be solved?
They required a response as of last Friday.
So we need to do something
The response you all
tonight.
been provided, or at least I was provided in the electronic
Everybody has
copy.
my response, sir.
Everybody's got that.
And I didn't see that.
And it was in the package here, so I'm just reading on what I got there. So we're gonna discuss and correct it. I talked to the sheriff a lot about it last week, starting when I got turned on to it. I think it was Monday week. Frankly, and I know this was a hard pillow for pill for Sheriff Melton to swallow. I recommended that he start identifying where he can cut $36,000 out of the remainder of this budget year. And that's what I think he's been trying to do by what he just said.
Well, going with what
I don't know any other way
Susan
around that.
said, the third quarter is about ready to come to an end, and you would have a better idea of how much excess fees would be available that we might help to pay this
That
off.
may help.
And then,
And we've already made an $18,000 check. We've already paid $18,000 before.
Yeah, but you used 2014 funds to pay 2013 debt.
That's what you asked him to do with it.
That's the only way that, that's,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
the only-
what he
yeah.
has to
yeah.
do.
Take
what
it
I
out
was
of the
referring to
budget.
was a formal budget to reflect that mechanism, however
A
it would
budget
be
amendment,
done.
a budget amendment for the 13 budget.
I don't think you can modify
So what
13
you're saying,
back to
then, so what you just said was that half of this is already
Yes, ma'am.
taken care of. So,
Well, not really, but
well, if he,
Well, you can't go back in 13 and pay it, Judge. It's gotta be out of 14 or fiscal court pay it.
Correct, it's got, that's
right.
what I said. It's
So
got, you got
he's-
one or two
Back in
choices
time,
here. You can either increase this one, because this is a hard deficit. This is cash money, this is a bounce check. It has to be repaid back out of this year's money. Your choice is either increase his budget by $36,552.
or he takes it out of
and then
his
pay
own
it back.
hide.
Or take out $36,552 from this year's budget for the sheriff for calendar year 2014.
I'm sorry.
Do I understand that you had a couple total vehicles and you didn't get the insurance money on that?
Correct.
Where'd the money go? For new ones?
They've been down here for,
How much, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money or little money?
I know one was $5,200 or $5,500, and I don't have the exact numbers.
You would think that would roll back into the fleet.
Well, it
How come, Ray? It doesn't go back to
All
the
the
fleet?
insurance adjustments go into an insurance account with the treasurer. And we pay out the debt on the repairs.
If it's total, then does the money go back so he can get another car,
The
or how's
money
it?
goes into an insurance pool.
we pay the premium out of the general
We pay the
fund.
premium out of that.
That helps defray the premium cost.
We pay insurance on all vehicles.
I understand that, but in this situation, if he loses a car for whatever, for an accident or whatever, do we not think, I mean, did you all say, okay, let's don't replace it, let's put this money back in the pool? or-
They asked to keep the car, and there was a small part of the check, $5,000.
that we also requested the funding, and
So who paid for fix this car up?
it didn't get fixed. It was total.
total.
And to show that we have been working hard, we've taken any of the wrecked cars that was totaled, we've taken parts off those cars, put them on cars that are on the road to defray costs, to keep them up, instead of putting a brand new part or whatever. I mean, we've done that off of several cars. Then we've also given several vehicles, 2 vehicles to the Parks Department. I think Fiscal Court had one. We give, when we have the extra vehicles or we're trying to get rid of them, we've also given those away too. That,
Well,
But I'm still stuck on this insurance thing. If you go out and buy a brand new car and it's got 500 miles on it and it gets totaled, you don't get that money back?
that would be about $33,000, wouldn't it?
So that money would go into this
we-
insurance fund and the sheriff would just be sorry out of luck?
If I
Yes,
may.
Madam
If
Treasurer,
I may, we
please.
pay bills. So no bills were presented. So insurance proceeds are used to pay for repairs. I saw no bills presented.
The cars have been totaled.
I don't handle the claims, I just
Yeah.
handle.
So there wasn't any
things paid
repairs to
for.
make on because they were
So
totaled.
no bills were presented for payment. It wouldn't be that we write a check to the other office. We would pay bills on their behalf for any repairs or maintenance.
You have not gone out and bought another car to replace this?
No, I didn't have the money.
Okay. So then that, to me, and I'm not familiar with how you do it, Ray, but to me, $5,500 ought to be used to come off of the $36,000 that.
The fiscal
As a
court
debt.
pays the insurance.
And
Yeah.
$600,000 in benefits
So when we
for the
budget,
sheriff's
when
office.
we do our budget in July 1st, we don't have money in there for to pay our insurance, we only go buy wrecked cars to pay our insurance? Surely we have money.
No, we have money to pay the
appropriated
insurance.
to pay insurance.
Sure we do, and the $600,000 in benefits for the sheriff's office. We got money for that too.
Well, we
Did
pay,
I understand the treasurer right when she said that money would be used for maintenance on the vehicles?
Yes.
So,
And that
is that, were
fiscal
you aware
court
of that?
pays bills as they're presented.
So what you're telling me, we can send down our maintenance costs?
This is
to
how
pay
the
for those
program
on our
is
cars?
worked, as long as I've been here, is that insurance proceeds cover bills for the damaged property. And when there's no repair, if it's replaced, then it would go towards replacement. But I've
I would
seen some of
submit that the
too.
sheriff and the treasurer are discussing two different types of repairs.
Yeah. I
The
think-
sheriff's
Yeah.
referring to catastrophic repairs such as damage, or the
No,
treasurer.
treasury.
The sheriff's referring to day-to-day operational
Right.
repairs. and
That's
ongoing
two
maintenance.
different apples and
So
oranges.
I just point that distinction seems
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah,
on
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I heard you say, Susan, that I think is imperative to this whole discussion, as far as I'm concerned, and you alluded to it too, is how do we keep this from happening again? Okay? And let me just say this, okay? I see, when you're here talking about it, and I see another person in this room that's running for sheriff. So we got the two candidates for sheriff. And I'm gonna say this, that Susan, I will expect us on a quarterly basis, minimally, to be monitoring the sheriff's budget to make sure that if any red lights, any things that look out of the ordinary, that look bad, that we're on top of it, and we don't get to October 1st budget and say, oh my gosh, look what's happened.
So I'm not running for sheriff, but I'll tell you how to stop it right now.
Well, we stop spending. And now,
No, it's more subtle than that. Close your accounts at the first of the year, period. Don't roll over.
well,
Don't try
and those are things that we need
Don't
to do.
try to write them over,
Okay.
period. At least quarterly, have a report, much the copy that goes to
There we go.
DLG to show where that you're at,
There we
period.
go.
If it's not budgeted, no matter how much you think the world requires it, no matter how much you think the service is needed, just don't do it. If you ain't got money to drive around 1,000 miles over the weekend patrolling the county, guess what? That means that the county says that it's not important to drive 1,000 miles around the county. Park the car at 800. The sheriff kept his promise. And it cost money, y'all. Let me tell you this right now. When you
absolutely.
fund cops, you better be funding prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and jails. You didn't think of that. When you hire another cop, they need a car. You
And a
didn't think of
uniform.
that. It's a huge slippery slope for every officer you pay on the street. It costs $10 across the board for every dollar you spend. I've advised Pat, like I tell the General Assembly in my job, if they're gonna give me 3 prosecutors, guess how much prosecution's gonna get done? 4 prosecutors worth. That's just the way the game has to be played. Budget sets your priorities. You can't spend more than you got. And you, no matter how important it seems to be, at the end of the day, you just can't spend it. Don't spend it if you ain't got it. Close your account. Fiscal court do its monitoring function by get a copy of the DLG report every quarter, and monitor it. And this is the most significant. Don't allow a $10 excess fee return back because you have no wiggle room. As a sailor, I can promise you, there's a word called leeway. If you have no leeway, guess what you're on? It's called the rocks. You have to have some leeway in your budget at the end of the year, or this is going to happen every time. You can't avoid it. I have no political interest in these remedies at all. This has to be done regardless of who's the sheriff, who's the judge, who's the magistrate, who's the county attorney. These are 4 reasonable recommendations. The other one is what I call the Carroll County remedy. Just take it over. There's good case law that says you can pass an ordinance and you can monitor it and you can take over the whole thing. I can't imagine that this court would want to do that and micromanage the sheriff's expenses or whoever's expenses. It's a two-way street. The county, the sheriff's office is part of the county and the county includes the sheriff's office. And we all have to work together. But if they'll do those 4 or 5 items, you can avoid this problem in the future. If you don't, and if you don't build in some leeway, and you don't close that account, and you don't monitor it, we're going to have this discussion. Because, let's face it, law enforcement costs money. They go out and do your bidding. They pay this, they do the state's bidding by enforcing the statute. They patrol to try to keep the county safe. They do whatever it is they feel is needed, you know, for the public benefit. But it ain't free. And I'll say this to the General Assembly, they act like it is too. It ain't. And that's why we're broke.
Well, tell the public that, I mean, because everybody's screaming
Well,
about
the
their
public's
taxes.
right there.
I can
Ain't
commit to you that it
free.
will not happen again.
You can't commit that, Sheriff. That's an impossible promise.
We're
Do your
fine with
best.
14 budget, and I'm gonna do my best.
Yeah.
The thing that I see, though, is, what I don't understand is, you said it was vehicle maintenance and uniforms. Uniforms were 23,000. You said you budgeted 20,000, so that's only $3,000. Vehicle maintenance was 53,000. Surely, what was budgeted there?
I'm not sure where you're getting your numbers from, I'm not sure what you're.
That's all it is.
Statement of revenues and expenditures and excess fees, you're into 2012, 31. So you only went over, if you budgeted 20,000 for uniforms, you went over 3,000. We're talking 170-some thousand
You're not
dollars.
talking $170,000, you're talking 36,000, 36,000.
That's only because you got an extra 132 in unexpected money revenues. If you hadn't gotten that, it would've been 170,000, because you spent the money. The money's gone. So, I mean, you know, and maybe you were anticipating those monies, maybe you anticipated, you know, more, but this is just not, this is unconscionable, in my opinion.
We start up every year in January broke. You know when the sheriff's office makes its money, starting in real money that pays everything?
Pretty quick, I imagine, like
No, about
November.
November 15th.
Yeah, pretty quick.
About November
Right.
15th. When we start off January 1st. We struggle for 11 months till we get our first commission check. Fortunately, this court does carry our salary and benefits, because there's no way to do it. We are doing good January, February, and March to pay back $7,500 that we give monthly to fiscal court for the salaries.
Right. You can get that money somewhere else, too.
Sheriff's advancement
Right.
through the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, we don't get
You don't-
for it. You have to pay extra to get that.
For the state.
And then,
Charge interest, it's like
Yeah.
a loan.
Yeah, they charge
man, you might
interest.
be liable for the interest.
Well, one of the things that I've, just talking to taxpayers and seeing what goes on is, and I don't know how much of, it would fall in on the maintenance vehicles or maintenance of, I know the uniforms has to be, cleaned or fixed or whatever, but for doing private work, if there's a cruiser sitting out here, and then and the uniforms there, and the officers there, and there's a wage put with that. The wage, what that comes back is the wage goes all to that officer. That goes all to that officer. He gets that. If he's out here doing a private job, the county don't get anything back on the use of that vehicle or the use of those uniforms. And that's one of the things that a lot of the taxpayers has expressed to me, said, we're paying for the uniforms, the police cruisers, paying for these cruisers, and you see them sitting down here and their lights is on, and and they're running. So that maintenance cost is going into that the fuel cost, and all of that.
That's incorrect.
Well, if I could just qualify this, that's all well and good, and that probably discussion should happen when you're talking about their budget.
Yeah.
The question before you is
Yeah.
what you're gonna do
Do
about
about- yeah.
$36,000.
What are you gonna do right now?
Yeah.
It's not even 36 at this point, he says it's
No,
18.
it's still 36, because what he did was he funded that flow-through that should have came for SRO benefits and paid it back with 14 funds, so it still skews 13, 14. It's still a shortfall for 2013 at 36,552. Part of it was addressed by paying payroll liabilities in 14. It's going to leave him short in 14 for payroll liabilities. Don't lose the ball
I got
by talking about budget issues. Your problem's how you're going to plug the hole.
Susan, usually May, June, we'll have a department that's short, and we'll have one that's got excess, looks like, and we do budget transfer. How's that? I know it is different, but how is it completely different than this? And we've taken 100,000 from the road department.
The fiscal court approves the fee office budgets as a lump sum. And we've talked about this numerous times, that you can, given explanation or excuse, whatever you want to call it, associated with a specific line item, but it's a lump sum budget for both fee offices. So,
I'd explored the possibility of going back into 2013, and there is some authority to modify that in the event within the sheriff's budget there was an available line item. That is, if, for example, if the excess revenue that was obtained, the 130, if that had not have been utilized, you could have adjusted that on paper. But this is a hard deficit. That is, more money was spent than was taken in. So you can't adjust those line items because those line items were all exhausted. That's why I think it's a really bad idea to have $10 anticipated revenue to get back. There's no leeway. It borders on dumb because it cuts off your own nose to spite your face. And this is what happens when you don't predict that. If you give the sheriff everything, it's like the sheriff saying, well, I don't want any of the fees to run my office. The legal phrase is just dumb. Just never do that. The sheriff shouldn't have asked it, and I told him never to do it again because it limits his available options, and that's why you all have to answer it now. When it comes up to budget again, please pad about $150,000 in anticipated revenue back to the county, or you're going to lose this opportunity to be facing this again. And I know the sheriff will do his best not to, but you can't make that promise and make it count. That's where you're locked in. All the money got spent.
Well, I know in the first year that you came back to the court and you was way over because of your fuel, and you was anticipating, so we came back and rejudged it, but we had that extra money there to be able to do it. And what really bothers me, and I kind of agree with Jill on this, is here it is September, and you knew about this in January, February, that you was going to be over budgeted. It would have been really nice to know, kind of been anticipating this. I mean, to hear about it, 2 weeks ago, was kind of aggravating
Well, I
to me.
mentioned it to you all before then.
I hadn't heard.
I had mentioned it to several of you before then.
Well,
There was a thing with the revenue too. I'm in the rental business, and every once in a while I need papers served for evictions and stuff. I'm down here at the courthouse, and I say I want the sheriff to serve these papers. Where's his box? What do I do with it? At the time, they said, you got to take it out to Chamberlain. Now, sheriff, it looks like to me that's another no-brainer. All the constables have boxes there. Why can't you get a box and then just throw it in there?
There is a box there.
What?
There is a box for the sheriff there. And I've addressed exactly what you just said with Sally Jump. Have you been using the sheriff's office? Have you been using constables?
I couldn't find it. I
So
asked
you're
them.
using constables.
I was using the sheriff till it moved down here, and I wasn't going to go all the way to
In the clerk's
Chamberlain.
office, we've had a box there, and all you gotta do is say you want the sheriff to serve it. We've increased our paper service extensively.
Well,
We've gotten a lot of
then
that
I've got a
business
problem with
back.
Sally then, I guess.
Yeah, I can't make them, I've had other people tell me that, and I've talked to Sally about it. So.
Where's your box? Why can't we just give it to a bailiff? And they give it to you, or the sheriff, they're in and out there all the
She
time.
has a place for all the sheriff's papers down there for us. All you gotta do is tell them you want the sheriff to serve it and write that $40 check, and we'll have it served that afternoon or the following next morning.
There's a market factor involved in that. The constables try to undercut the sheriffs on service of
Oh,
process.
I realize
Because
that, but I tried to use the sheriff.
Well, I know, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess, I know.
But I couldn't, I mean,
tried
they
to
said,
cut 'em out.
he's not here, so.
What, did you ever talk to Shepherd?
I haven't had an opportunity to get to him.
Okay.
All right, folks, here's what I'm suggesting. We require the sheriff to bring in his September quarterly report, and we review it at our October 3rd meeting, and see where he is for 14 with line items and salaries, and try to make a plan in October to resolve this issue. I think that it'll give us a good handle once we have the September 30th quarterly report, and go from there.
But will the auditor go along with this?
I mean, because you said they wanted an answer last Friday.
They wanted, the
And I give them
judge
one.
gave me the answer.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any additional
Okay.
deadlines. I
All
don't
right.
know when the report's gonna come out.
Okay,
I give you all a copy of my response.
yeah, I know.
The report coming out isn't a significant deadline, because it's gonna say the same thing. What you're really facing that's problematic is you're talking about retroactively modifying a budget, and this budget closes. You only have 6 more meetings this year,
Sure.
7, something like that.
6.
Praise the
Before this
Lord.
year's over. You got,
Somebody asked me,
Well, we can have a special.
Yeah, we can have a special meeting.
somebody
got one
asked
of
me
those
that
special
question
meetings.
today, and I
but
don't
that's where your
know.
time's running on it, because you're gonna have to adjust it before this fiscal year.
Yes,
Or the calendar year partnership, I keep misstating that.
The
And your double
sheriff's
problem is, the closer you get to the end of the year, if you're talking about negatively amending 14's budget to cure the budget, it just squeezes harder the closer you get to the end of the year. You know, it's easy to take, not easy. It's one thing to take out $36,000 over 3 months. It's a whole other thing to take out $36,000 over, like, you know, a month. So
well, it's not gonna
gets
come to
worse.
that, I mean.
Well, but that, your time is
Sure.
just creating greater
Right,
pressure.
but I think he makes a good point, that the judge makes a good point, that let's look at what his budget looks like right now, by the end of the third quarter, and, you know, and plan to be here for however long it takes at the next court meeting to see what we can draw out of his budget to pay for this thing.
My recommendation, just get it, deal with it,
Just what,
do it, deal with it, and get it done. And
tonight?
don't, no, I mean, I think it's prudent to evaluate where everybody's budget stands, but don't let it linger.
No, no, no.
Yeah, no, we gotta get
I
this
think
done.
we gotta
It's gotta be
resolve
done.
it
Yeah.
October.
Pay the whole
So
amount
bring your
or
dinner.
divide it over 3 months.
Or whatever.
You
Is
gotta
it
do it
the
over,
morning
you only do it over
meeting?
3 months.
Bring your
because that's all
breakfast.
No, I mean, but find the total $36,000 or $18,000.
The other year's spent. I mean, it's gonna come out of the next 3 months.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, the rest of it's always gone.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, but that's all right.
Yeah, well, it's gonna, the damage will be, the hurt's gonna be the next 3 months.
All right.
Now, the hurt to us or the hurt to the sheriff's
To him,
department?
to him.
It's actually going to
I'm lucky that I don't get to be involved in that remedy. That's beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get it resolved and whatever we need to do to make it right.
So you'll make sure that we have your budget in here, the quarterly budget report, on October 3rd.
I'd have had it tonight, but Tracy, in 4 years, had taken a vacation, and she's on vacation this week.
Yeah, but don't, it's not.
All right. Thank you very much.